Welcome, action fans, and thanks for joining us for another edition of All 90s Action All the Time. I'm your host, Scott Murphy, and on today's show, we're getting a bit European as we are talking about the cult classic that is Leon. Now, possibly kind of unusually for the show, there is no special guest. However, there is the return of my regular co host. You know who he is. He's our very own pill popping, Beethoven loving, mischief making Mr. Craig Drime. Welcome
And
back.
I love Mozart. Yes, it's great to be back. Yes.
Oh, cool. It's great to have you back, Craig. It's great to have you back. And we will definitely talk more about that scene and the general wildness of Gary Oldman. Who, like, actually, before we get into the stats I normally give, I do want to say right off the bat that it's amazing. Like, this week, which will probably date the podcast that we're recording in July, I recently saw Long Legs, and which has Nicolas Cage in it, and he does a great performance. There's some wild moments, but I think that he does some subtle work as well. And Nicolas Cage has a very hardened reputation as this kind of actor who's always crazy, he's always over the top, whatever. And a lot of people like dislike him for it, and a lot of people love him for it. But it's kind of become the stereotype around him. And yet, this same stereotype has never hardened around Gary Oldman, who gave some of the wildest performances of the 90s.
I was actually that's in my notes of the comparison between the two. Of throughout the 90s, you would not expect, I guess, the Gary Oldman of today to be the Gary Oldman of the 90s, where he just has gone very, like, all subtle, and it's like a lot of quiet, kind of quiet, intense acting.
That's true. That's true. But I guess we can get more into that. But we'll definitely talk more about Gary Oldman's collection of 90s performances and just how bizarro he was. Like, if younger people are listening and are just aware of like the Gary Oldman of today, you really need to go back and visit his 90s work, because oh boy, there is some characters in there, and this is definitely one of them. But we'll get more into that after I do the stats.
Let's talk business. This guy comes to town every Tuesday. Are you free Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm free Tuesday.
You can't stop what you can't see.
This guy came from the outside. He was a pro. He was fast.
In the art of the kill, Leon was the master.
Somebody's coming up. Somebody's serious.
He never missed a hit. He never got caught.
You're indestructible. Bullets slide off you. You played with them.
And above all else, he never had a reason to care. Until now.
I like these calm little moments before the storm.
My family was shot down by DEA officers.
3 kids here. One of them is missing. Find her.
Please open the door. Please.
From the director of La Femme Nikita.
If you don't help me, I'll die tonight. I can feel it.
An innocent girl with no one else to turn to.
What exactly do you do for a living?
Cleaner.
You mean you're a hitman? Cool.
A perfect assassin.
I need you to help me, Leon. I want to get those dirtbags who killed my brother.
With someone to finally believe in.
Change ain't good. Remember that, Léon.
I will.
They're about to come face to face with the cop who's crossed the line.
Bring me everyone.
What do you mean, everyone?
on to today's film, which came out on the 14th of September, 1994, 4 days before I turned 9 years old. It was written and directed by Luc Besson, who is most famous for directing the likes of, as well as this, La Femme Nikita and The Fifth Element. Critically, it is currently sitting on a 74% on Rotten Tomatoes, based on 66 reviews. It's got a 64 on Metacritic, based on 12 reviews, and it has a quite startling 8.5 out of 10 on IMDb, which ranks it at number 40 on the IMDb Top 250.
Oh wow!
And it has a 4.0 on Letterboxd. Box office wise, it made a perfectly acceptable, perfectly good $45 million off of a $16 million budget. Definitely in profit off the bat there. Making it the 39th highest grossing film of 1994, placing it just one above City Slickers 2, The Legends of Curly's Gold, and one below D2, The Mighty Ducks, making an awfully strange triple bill. Like the two of those films make sense together, but if you stick Leon on in the middle, it's kind of weird. But anyway, try that at home if you want to. Not you got one really good action film and two not terrible comedies? Question
Sequel,
mark.
yeah, comedy sequels.
I'm basing this off of like childhood memories. I've not seen either of those in at least 25 years, so I don't know if they're any good or not. I don't remember hating them as a child. But I don't think that's a recommendation necessarily. So yes, Craig, I'm going to assume that
Yes.
you have seen this one before because you were alive in the 90s and you're an action fan. And if you have, if you complete either of those two requirements, you've probably seen Leon.
Yes. So so it took me a while since we watched the the director's cut version in the States specifically. I'm not sure how it was over there, but there's the theatrical version, which I saw, and I used to watch it a ton. And I remember I had a friend, I even, that I bought it on DVD and I would keep watching it. And I had a friend who was kind of always competitive about watching things. And he finally got all excited. He watched this version before I did. And I remember him coming into school the next day and being like, don't watch this version because it'll ruin the movie for you. Because the theatrical version, plays it more. It takes out a lot of the I guess we'll end up getting into it, the creepiness of the age range, where it's more like, oh, he's like becoming this surrogate father figure and she just might have a crush on him, instead of what this version of the movie is. That's the director's cut. But yeah, and I didn't end up watching this version until I was probably like 17 or something, but I've seen it many times.
Yeah.
Overall.
I've seen it many times as well. I've seen the theatrical cut more. The theatrical cut is the one that's generally available on streaming, and it is the one that I watched for this recording twice, because this recording has been something of a saga. But like, we don't need to get into that. So yes, but I can't remember the first time I saw it. I feel like with so many cult films, the first time I saw it is like a friend recorded it off of Film 4 for me. And for people who live outside of the UK, Film 4 was like a Sky cable channel that showed film that was owned by Channel 4. and they also like have like a production arm that make like have made a number of British films or co-produced a lot of British films. And they were often the ones who showed like a lot of kind of cult movies. But I think it was that. But I mean, I guess like generally, if it's like a kind of cult movie, I generally either saw it on Film 4, Channel 4, or BBC Two. That was the main places you would see kind of like cult or art house kind of cinema. So like yeah, and I probably would have seen it. I wouldn't have seen it when it came out because I would have been, like I said, it came out 4 days before I turned 9. So like it's not something my parents would be taking me to necessarily. But yeah, I probably would have seen it probably late 90s, probably in 98, 99, something around that range when I was like 13, 14. And yeah, I've seen it a bunch of times since. And I do feel like we should mark this occasion because I feel like, things like, I mean, the movie that we're covering next month is actually supposedly a very good film. I won't reveal what it is now, but apparently it is very good. Not seen it yet. But there will be a lot more next year in the kind of 95-25 kind of season. There'll be a lot more kind of trashiness, and we will kind of return to normal. So this, I think we've done okay. This year has been somewhat Herculean because we've been tackling these kind of big beasts of action, with this film, with The Crow, with True Lies, with these sorts, and of course Speed as well. Speed in a June episode. So yeah, and I feel like when we're tackling, because so much has been said and so much has been written about these films, I hope that we have managed to add a little bit of extra color to those commentaries, and we've not just recited what everybody else said about them. And I hope we do the same with this episode. But there's part of me that's been very pleased to cover these movies, and there's part of me that's very relieved that we can just talk about some kind of trashy stuff as well later on.
Okay. Can you hear me? No, I actually I agree completely. I think that's one of the hard things overall about even I know both of us look at horror as well, of covering certain films where you just kind of feel like, oh well, they've been touched so much, I don't even know what to bring, as you've already said. And but yeah, I'm glad of what we're going to be tackling next year, and of course I do not want to spoil any of it, so I will not talk about them further.
No, but we have some trashy delights coming for you next year. We do cover some big films as well next year, but we will talk more about that next year. I guess we should dive into Leon, and I guess yeah, I mean, it really, it's kind of, it really grabs you from the beginning. I think like we will discuss more what a problematic figure Luc Besson is, and our kind of not wanting to give Luc Besson too much credit for things, because like he's a problematic person, and but we will get into that more. But first, Luc Besson is a very stylish filmmaker in terms of just his filmmaking. He is a very stylish filmmaker, and he knows how to grab an audience's attention. And I think this whole opening segment that we get from the introduction of Leon in Danny Aiello's Italian restaurant. I can never remember his character name. I just like Danny Aiello. It always just seems like himself to me. So like I just always think of him as like, oh, it's Danny Aiello.
Yeah.
So we get the introduction and of Leon, and then we get like this opening mission, which is like a really great action set piece right from the off. And
Yeah.
I just wondered, I was just thinking, like, give us your kind of your thoughts and your kind of your reaction to like this opening segment that really kind of sets things up so nicely.
It does. What I realized too, and I hopefully it doesn't go too far off topic. But as I was watching it, with the movie in general, I'm like, in my mind, I guess because it's been a couple years since I last saw it, or like this is one of the most like um entertain or like bombastic action films, and that's what I kept picturing. But then watching it this time, I was like, oh, there's really only three kind of action or like killing sequences: the opening, then the massacre, and then the very end. And um you think about it in terms of our attention span now, where it's like whatever, a John Wick or something, where it's like has to be action the whole movie. But yeah, the movie, it the way that it's set up and the way he does it, again, not to get into his personal aspect, but his stylistic approach, I mean, it grabs you, and it engages you until the very end, which I give it a ton of credit for. But yeah, you just see, I think the way it's done, it's like you don't see a lot of the actual kills in themselves, or if you do, it's like, the person's pulled up, so you really only see their feet, or you see it in a security camera or things like that, or when what is it, the windows, the like shades,
Oh,
or the
the
metal
kind of the metal shutters come
yeah.
down, like the kind of
And
security shutters or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and you know that he killed whatever the two or three guys that are out there, but you don't actually see any of it. I think those aspects really kind of draw you in more, instead of, if you were just to see everything. Um, in terms
Yeah.
of like
It's
what is he
almost
actually doing? Yeah.
it's
And his
almost
skill set. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think like to cut to like a couple of points you made there, I think because the opening action sequence is so impactful and like the ending, that each big action segment is so impactful that I think like it's the thing you take away from the film. And then like, yes, I think that I'm very much the same. It's been a minute since I'd last seen it. Obviously I've seen it twice in the last month now, but it had been a minute, and uh, I'm very much in my mind. I was very much the same. I very much had this placed in my head as like adjacent to like a John Wick, or
Yeah.
like one of those kind of like 90s kind of John Woo movies. Like a very, very over the top, very bombastic, very action heavy actioner. And actually, it's not. It does have very bombastic action set pieces, but it's not overall that type of movie. It's not
Yeah.
what you would call like a pure action movie that's like something like The Raid, where it's beginning to end just action, action, action.
Yeah.
There's a lot of character beats in this, and there's a lot of just kind of hanging out with our main characters. Um, so I think that's one thing. And I think like the impactfulness of this opening scene does lay the groundwork for kind of tricking your brain into thinking this is a different movie than it actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely think so. Um, there was another point I was going to make, and I now can't remember it. So we'll
But
just move
no,
on.
I mean, it's great, and it has the little beats of humor, like the sex worker, where she's just like packing up her stuff as he's
Yeah.
holding the knife to his throat, and she just kind of awkwardly walks out.
Yeah.
And but yeah, you see just kind of how
Oh, that reminds me.
professional he is, Leon.
That reminds me. Yes, the other interesting thing about this particular action sequence, like you said about all the people like kind of dying off camera and stuff like that, there is like a kind of almost like a kind of video game element to this action sequence, like
Yeah.
a kind of Metal Gear Solid, like that kind of thing. to this, is like trying to not be spotted by the henchmen. It's kind of almost structured like that, like a video game mission,
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't even, because when he meets, I looked it up. Danny, his character's name is Tony. When he meets Tony, and then when you like, even to the point where he's in the shadows holding the knife to him, and he's saying, "Call this number," and all that, you still don't even really get a strong sense of who he is, of who Leon is. And there's like the whole sequence is mystery where you as the audience are feeling kind of the same as I forgot the guy who he's supposed to be scaring to leave the city's name is, but
Oh, he doesn't have a name?
Yeah.
Okay. He doesn't have a name. The Tony character refers to him as that fat bastard, and
yes,
in the actual credits, he's also just listed as he's either listed as Fat Man or Fat Bastard. I can't remember. He's just listed.
Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't have like a character name. So yes, he is just listed as Fat Man.
Okay.
That's all he's listed as. So they didn't bother to give that kind of gangster character a character name.
Yeah.
And also, like, one of the things I did watch, like a little behind the scenes kind of documentary, on that you can find on YouTube, and the guy who plays Fat Man, and like, that's not me being politically incorrect. The script, that's what he's referred to in the script and the credits. Like his one disappointment, he said, was when Leon disappears after he's held the knife to his throat. He like gives like this reaction shot and then this kind of big sigh of relief of, and he feels he could have done that better, and if he had just had one more take, he could have really sold that even more. But to be fair to the actor, I think that he does, even in the finished product, sell it pretty well, and I think he's pretty funny in his reactions and the way he's like desperately trying to order his men to get Leon, and he's just getting these progressively more and more machine guns out of this closet that apparently has a never-ending supply of machine guns, and then he tries to call the cops, and like, as like a kind of like oily, scheming, cowardly kind of like kind of gangster character. I think he plays it really well, and I think that it, as well as being an impactful action sequence, it is also like an effectively humorous scene as well.
Yes, no, I agree. And I think what I will say, because maybe it's just the way movies are now, where everything is so clean, what you do feel is that I think it's throughout most of the action sequences in this film, but there you feel the like frantic chaos of it all. Based on how the camera's moving, based on like, how it's following him, and the breathing and him sweating, and like it raised
yeah, and I think like I think the film does a good job of like, so basically, people have maybe not seen the film or whatever to can describe the setup. Basically, they one of the henchmen that is like kind of downstairs, who is Native American character called Tonto. Again, not my fault. I'm just telling you what's happening in the script. Like, he holds him at gunpoint, and then they have like a phone call with the gangster, and he's like, there's a person who wants to see you. What type of person? A serious person. And when he says that, and they kind of know what that means, that like there's somebody coming to get them, it does a good job. The film does a good job of like conveying the anxiety and the panic that sets in the gang of like, right, if one of our fellow henchmen is kind of putting it in these terms, that this is a serious person, then this is something we should be scared of. And it does a really good job of like them kind of losing their heads and being like, oh well, and they kind of almost kind of defeat themselves, because like they're like, because they're so scared of what a serious person could mean.
Yeah. Well, and you even feel it, not to jump basically the whole movie, but you feel that same energy at the end with the police, or even almost acting or the SWAT team is acting almost the same way, of they're just like panicking. It's not like they're well structured force of like, okay, they're all in complete control either,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um,
But
yeah,
but
but
yeah,
after that, I guess, like, yeah, after that, like, big impactful action sequence, then we go along to like introducing like the other kind of main character of the film, Matilda, who is played by a 13-year-old Natalie Portman. Her age will become important in a bit when
yes.
we talk more about or when we talk about some of the more problematic elements of this film. But anyway, at the moment, so she's sitting on some steps. She's smoking, and that's how we get introduced to her. Yeah, don't smoke, kids. But yeah, and then so we're introduced to her. Her introduction is fun. We get a sense of very quickly we get a sense of who she is. Like, I think like we should really highlight that like Portman's performance is really quite amazing, particularly
Yeah.
for somebody who's like only 13. And very much off the bat, you get a sense of like who this character is and her rebellious streak, but also how she's still just kind of a sweet kid underneath, and like
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. You get all those kind of elements of her character quite quickly, and she feels like a rounded character quite quickly, and I think that is in large part due to Natalie Portman's performance kind of elevating the character beyond, I think, what was on the written page.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think yeah, she, especially rewatching this older now, um because Leon, there's most of the focus is, well, it's on both of them throughout this entire movie, but he it's definitely harder for him to, being that one, he's French speaking English, and two, what things like he can't read or whatever, of really kind of discussing his feelings or certain aspects where it feels like, oh, she's really holding her weight, besides probably Gary Oldman, um, who I thought was in the movie more than I did. For some reason, that was another aspect, but she is kind of the one really kind of commanding the scenes almost, you feel like.
Yeah, no, she very much is. She's a big presence in every scene that she's in, and she's acting opposite like a lot of great actors, and she never feels overwhelmed in any scene. Even
Yeah.
the scenes where she's acting across from Jean Reno, who's a very accomplished actor, or even the scenes that we get, um, like, yeah, a couple of scenes with her and Gary Oldman. So like, yeah, she really holds her own in every scene she's in,
Yeah.
and kind of owns the movie. I mean, like, it is kind of in many ways Matilda's movie as much as it is Leon's movie. In fact, in some ways, more Matilda's movie than it is Leon's movie.
Yeah. Which I know there was supposed to be, random tangent, a sequel, and they kind of Columbiana, it
Columbiana, the Zoe
became an
Saldana flick.
unofficial. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the unofficial sequel that like was supposed to happen at some stage, or they were trying to develop for like a long time, but like there was rights issues or whatever. So then they made Columbiana as a kind of like, well, in our minds, this is kind of the sort of sequel, even if it's not an official sequel and
Yeah.
doesn't actually follow the Matilda story.
Yeah. But
Um,
I know, but yeah, what within those first couple minutes, you really get a sense of, that her father is and it's like bits and pieces of dialogue where it doesn't feel like it's just exposition dump, of like, that her father is like running drugs, something that he There's some sort of issue that some of the drugs were skimped. Um, you know that her mom is, or is it her stepmom?
Stepmom.
Is a sex worker. You know, she kind of has the only one that she really has a strong relationship with is her, like the little brother who's probably 3.
It's
And
4.
then,
It's
oh
mentioned it's
yes,
4.
yes. And then, but yeah, they're definitely living in an area where it's not great and she's abused and all these aspects. You get all of it without being hit over the head within like such a quick amount of time. And I think that is one of the lean kind of trimming the fat aspects of the script that work really well. And then, obviously the script then spends a majority of its time focusing on other aspects that we will get to, we promise. But
we will get to indeed.
Yeah.
But first, before we get to like all the
Yes.
problematic stuff, we should get to Gary Oldman, who is
Yes.
introduced to us. One of his kind of henchmen. It turns out there is a reveal not that far away where basically they're actually police officers, but at first you just think they're like gangsters, drug runners, but it turns out they're corrupt cops. And one of the corrupt cops, Malky, is interrogating Matilda's father, who we don't get. I think like at one point there's a phone call from a school that talks about the Landos. So I think he is Mr. Lando, but I think he's just mentioned in the credits as Matilda's father. He's getting interrogated by this Malky guy about like cutting the drugs and how when they dropped off the drugs with them, they were 100% pure and they're 90% pure. And how did that happen? And Matilda's father is protesting his innocence. And then he says, "You don't want to disturb, Stan." And then, but we tap Stan on the shoulder as Matilda's father continues to protest his innocence. And then we get introduced to Gary Oldman's character as he takes off his headphones and then just sniffs Matilda's father in quite a deranged fashion and then says, "Well, I believe you, but you need to find out whoever has stolen the drugs, and get back to us by tomorrow." And then I guess like we'll just segue in because it's so close. It's so close in terms of scenes into the next time we see Gary Oldman, where he is addicted to some sort of pills. I don't know what maybe they're like amphetamines or something. He doesn't swallow them with water. He just crunches them and then swallows them dry, and then does the weirdest semi dance thing as he swallows them.
It's like he kinks his neck or something, and
and then he kind of stretches out his arms in this kind of weird way and contorts his body, like he's having some sort of fit or something, and then swallows them, and then that's only the beginning of the madness because then he like bursts into the house. He starts shooting up the family. He kills the elder daughter and the mother, and later on the younger son.
So I will. So the son isn't killed by him.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's the reggae guy kills the son, doesn't he?
Yeah, because the son, they weren't going to.
That's right. That's
kill
right.
the son or whatever. And
that's right. He just killed the elder daughter and the stepmother, and then he has like this. He has this monologue about Beethoven and talks to the guy about Beethoven, and I don't know, like maybe you can take it away, Craig. Tell us about this monologue about Beethoven and all that is involved with that. Yeah.
So it's basically, and he does this thing where he parts there's like the beads door or whatever where he parts it in an interesting way, and Matilda's father is sitting up against basically the window standing. And I should preface that Matilda is out getting milk, and she's also getting milk for Leon. It was kind of something where he just said, I'll take some milk, and she was all excited about doing it. So she's not there for it. Um, but yeah, he goes into this after killing the wife in the tub, killing the daughter, and then yeah, he's talking about when he's doing raids. And by the way, it's like they were supposed to contact them by noon, and it's 12:01 if I remember, or something.
That's correct.
Yeah, when he's doing raids, he likes to listen to he loves classical music, and oh, are you a classical music fan? And then that's where he says it's one of my most quoted movie lines. I don't know why. Where he goes, "I love Mozart," and he's talking about different composers of how they make him feel when he's kind of basically doing these raids, and but some of them are they're just too boring. They don't fit with it, or and yeah, it's not connected at all. He's just giving this whole spiel. Um, until then the little boy runs. That's when the reggae looking cop starts shooting the gun randomly out of because he gets spooked. And then the father grabs a gun, shoots him, Gary Oldman, in the arm. He falls over. The father tries to run out, and Gary Oldman basically shoots him in the back, and then shoots him several more times because he messed up um his coat, which the
Because it's a brand new suit, and he's very
yes,
content.
yes.
It's brand new, and now it's got a hole in it. He doesn't know how it's going to be fixed, and like he's super upset, man.
Yeah.
You know, like he fuck with his suit, and that's what you get.
Which the one cop who is talking to him in the very initial part, which you were talking about, Scott, he seems to be the only voice of reason in this whole thing.
Unit.
Where
Yeah.
yeah, where he's like, stop, he's dead, stop shooting him, like we gotta go. And throughout the whole time it's almost like he's just this like the voice of reason in their unit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You would be very pleased to know that I found out from the kind of behind the scenes stuff that uh that while the monologue about Beethoven is in the script and how he loves Beethoven and how it works best for like this type of raid, and and the thing about like, oh, maybe you're not a fan of Beethoven, he's all about big beginnings, and then after that he can be a bit but the thing about like, oh, you must be like a Mozart guy, and the I love Mozart. Like that was improvised by Gary Oldman.
Oh yeah.
And also like the thing where he is like pretending to play piano on top of the fireplace, that was improvised by Gary Oldman as well.
Okay.
Like where he's talking about because I saw like a behind the scenes thing where he did like a couple of takes of that, of like at first he was just saying the line about the kind of you must be more of a Mozart guy without kind of tapping the fireplace or anything. But then he thought that would be that there would be something to that would, and actually I do think that adds something to the scene where he's just like he's kind of playfully tapping the fireplace as if he's kind of playing piano, of like, oh, you must be more of a Mozart guy.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it like him adding that, like it makes him all the more of like of a psychopathic, not just some dirty cop that's trying to get revenge on because they cut the drugs or whatever, but it's like, oh man, he's a complete like deranged lunatic. And and the fact that I mentioned before, we've talked about how like there's only a couple action pieces, but they're so impactful that that's what you go with. That's another aspect of like Gary. After this scene, you don't really see Gary Oldman that much throughout the rest, the rest of the movie. But it's like it's so the scene is so intense that he does like whatever that monologue is of how he presents it. He just, I don't know, it sticks with me of like, oh yeah, Gary Oldman's basically in every other scene in this movie, but that's not the case at all.
Yeah. And like I do want to say it, like I mean, you can debate whether or not you think that True Romance is an action movie or not. It's certainly got some action elements, but maybe it's more of a crime thriller. But if we are including True Romance as kind of an action movie, has his like quartet of action movie performances in True Romance, this film, The Fifth Element, and Air Force One. Watch those 4 performances and tell me that Gary Oldman is not one of the great scenery chewing, just mental batshit actors that we've had in the last, I don't know, 40 years, let's say.
Well, because then you even have, it's almost the same bit with Fifth Element, where it's like him and Bruce Willis never actually interact in that whole movie, but yet you're just like, I don't know, he does that southern accent thing, and which that one's even more like silly villain. But yeah, then he has Dracula, which is an action movie. But
Yeah.
the 90s of Gary Oldman was just him doing voices and being crazy in some way or another.
That is true. That is true because like like you say, Dracula's another kind of quality over the top performance, which is, I mean, delicious.
Yes.
I really like, some people are some people are not keen on Coppola's Dracula, but like I love the kind of the lush over the topness of that film, and I think it perfectly balances out like Gary Oldman's overacting and Keanu Reeves underacting. I think like evens things out. And that's not a shot at Keanu Reeves. I genuinely love Keanu Reeves. He's possibly miscast in that movie.
No, yeah. He's definitely miscast in that movie. Him, he is going on Dracula rant. It's like one of those where you have Gary Oldman, Anthony Hopkins. It's like there's all these cast members that you're like, okay, yeah, I mean they're perfect for the role, and then it's like Reeves and Ryder. You're kind of like, you made it a choice there with that one.
Yeah. Do you know what? As well, like maybe it's a British thing. I'm thinking that maybe it's a British thing. Maybe like British actors have like a natural air of respectability that we don't get with like American actors, and therefore these kind of reputations for being like over the top scenery chewers don't stick to them as much, because like Anthony Hopkins is exactly the same. Anthony Hopkins is a great actor who I've seen do subtle performances, but also a lot of the time he's just shouting things. You know, like
yeah, it might be because of the connection to theater, because you know,
yeah.
We're just like, oh well, yeah, they came up in during theater, and they're probably on the West End, or whatever it may be. Where with Nicolas Cage,
I guess I know what you mean, and there is like that kind of there is that thing that some theater actors have where like they still act as if it's theater, even in movies. I've noticed that thing with various, like thinking of like some other action movies that we've covered. I remember like in Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible has like Vanessa Redgrave as Max, and Vanessa Redgrave is definitely one of those actors who's like a theater actor who still acts in movies like it's theater, which comes over in this kind of over the top kind of scenery chewing way. Which I think like, so I think there is something kind of like, yeah, you maybe have, I mean, I don't think you need to change your mode. I'm very for kind of bug-eyed over the top kind of acting. I'm very into it. But like I know that some people are put off by it. But yeah, I think honestly, I can't imagine Nicolas Cage changing either. I can't remember. I can't think of him like going into his kind of respectability phase, or kind of like a more kind of under. I mean, I have seen him do more subtle performances, but like you always have his natural caginess. Where but I definitely think there's something in this. I definitely think, because I'm thinking more and more of overactors and actors I like, but who like have a tendency towards kind of bombast And like it's kind of the same thing with the likes of your other British villains or action movie villains. You know, your Alan Rickmans and your Jeremy Irons and your Charles Dances. All
Yeah.
of whom don't seem to have the same kind of stigma attached to them as like a Nicolas Cage, but who very much act in bombastic high gear
Yeah.
quite a lot of the time.
Yeah. No, I agree completely.
So maybe we cracked it. Maybe just
Yeah.
Britishness just gives you a cloak of respectability in the acting realm, certainly in the Western world. You know, like maybe it's different elsewhere.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess we should go back to Leon.
Yes.
After that kind of sidetrack.
So, so basically, for those of you that haven't seen it, which you probably should watch it first, but the massacre happens. Matilda comes back to, and there's this kind of very tense scene where she comes back, but she keeps walking towards Leon's door, and then kind of overhears and sees little bits that her family has just been massacred, and she knocks on the door, and then after a long beat, Leon reluctantly opens the door and lets her in, making the suspicious, dirty cop think that, oh, well, he must be just her father instead, or, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of, when it sets in motion that now she starts finding out that he is a hitman. And then
Which we should mention, she is very cool with very
Yes.
quickly.
Yes.
What I think, like watching it again. I mean, I think when I was younger and I watched it, I was just like, well, I just rolled with it. I didn't think too much of it. But like thinking about it, I was like, this is, yeah, this is weird. Quite how quickly she is just very much kind of like, oh, you killed people. Oh, that's cool. Oh,
Yeah.
maybe you could train me to kill people. Like,
Yes.
she like that seems like a quick development.
Yeah. No, it is, very quick, and then but that's basically what then sets in motion everything is that, he gives her a gun at one point and says, well, if you just want to kill people here, just do this. And then she, even to prove how dedicated she is, she starts like firing off like the gun in, into from the window into the, street midday. And yeah, it becomes kind of this thing where then, um, I guess not spoiling the whole plot, but basically throughout this whole time, he's kind of training her where she's just cleaning up. She's following the same routine he does, which is very structured, with watering his plant, with working out every morning. And then he's showing her little bits of the ropes, like, using a sniper rifle or elements like that. And throughout it, we kind of get this back and forth where he keeps going to see Tony, and Tony's getting suspicious of it, thinking, oh, well, he must be involved with a woman, or why is he using a sniper rifle, which seems that's like basic level stuff. He's getting too rusty. And so they're there's kind of that back and forth for a decent portion of the movie, I want to say. And
It's quite, yeah. I mean, a lot of the movie, a lot of the movie is about this kind of central relationship and her being kind of trained up as as a as an assassin, as a hitman. And yeah, depending on what cut you watch, like in both cuts, this is a large section of the movie. It's an even larger section of the movie in the director's cut or the international version, whatever you want to call it, which is about it's about 20 minutes longer.
Yes.
The original cut, the theatrical cut, is about an hour and 49. But the director's cut is over 2 hours. It's about an hour. Yeah, about an hour, 110 minutes for the theatrical cut, and the longer version is it's about 25 minutes of additional footage. So it kind of comes to almost like 2.5 hours, like in the extended edition. And then you know, as much like we try to delve into kind of the more serious aspects of these movies, or the more problematic aspects of these movies, in as much depth as we have the bandwidth to do. I mean, obviously there is
Yes.
other podcasts that are about kind of problematic things, or are about, you know, like, you know, podcasts like Battle of the Bastards, which was about problematic figures and can delve in depth to these things. Now, we don't want to ignore these things. We don't want to minimize any of these things, but also there, because this is like largely a nostalgia podcast, you know, we only have so much bandwidth to kind of deal with these things, and it's going to be put within the conversation, kind of either side of like a fun conversation, and that
Yes.
might feel like awkward or clunky to some people listening. We're going to try and make this transition as kind of as smooth as possible, and also try to be respectful as possible in the following conversation, which
Yes.
you know, it deals with serious matters that could be triggering for some people listening. So I just want to give a heads up on that. So before we delve into it, I guess like give a little bit of background. Luc Besson is something of a problematic figure. In the course of the Me Too movement, he was accused of sexual assault by a couple of different women. The backstory of this film is, well, certainly in the mind of Maïwenn, who is an actress in this movie. She briefly appears as a young prostitute. She was about 18 when this movie came. And she believed that the movie was inspired by her relationship with Luc Besson. Luc Besson first met her when she was 13, and then they started dating when she was 15, which is for people who don't know, is the age of consent in France. And then she fell pregnant at age 16. This was when Luc Besson was 33 years old, which probably sounds quite gross to the majority of people listening. And yes, obviously, controversy, particularly post Me Too, has grown around this movie, considering the way the relationship between Leon and Mathilda is framed, and it's quite sexualized, and particularly in the international version. I think
Yes.
that there is some scenes that are played for comedy, and it is like John Reno's reaction makes it quite funny, which makes it seem more like a kind of innocent crush, which actually makes it seem more like there is not a sexual thing here. And it does seem like there is various different accounts of like Luc Besson himself seems to go back and forth between saying like, oh well, you know, American audiences were offended by this, but you know, French audiences were fine with it. And then but also kind of like hedging his bets and saying like, oh well, this and that scene was played for laughs, and there was nothing, I didn't think of it as like a, you know, sexual thing when I was writing it. Maïwenn obviously sees it as like a kind of this kind of romance of a sort. And but then also John Reno seems to think the opposite, where he said he deliberately um, played Leon as if he was like a kind of slightly mentally handicapped character, kind of almost desexualize him to kind of get away from the threat of it being viewed like that. So it seems like very complicated, and it seems like there's various different interpretations, and it seems like some people in the crew kind of almost lean into the pedophilic aspect of it, and some very much run away from it. I don't know, like Craig, what your thoughts are, or what you want to say on kind of like kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to this movie.
As we've said, as we mentioned many times in the beginning of like we have to get to it. Yeah, so the movie itself, as it goes along, I can see with Jean Reno, with his approach, he does definitely try and do it in a way that, especially the theatrical cut, there's a strong argument of like he obviously doesn't see it, then he starts almost trying to take care of her more like a father, and he just finds love for her as a parent would love a child, not fully because I'm not excusing it in that way at all. But the best that a movie like that could, because it's all, it's twisted, and he's a hitman, and she, the background she came from, her character. Unfortunately, it's a harder argument to make with the international cut or the director's cut, because there's so much more time and I don't think it's his fault. I think it's the way it's edited. I think it's the script, all of those aspects. So it's not his acting that makes it feel that way, but where it does definitely feel a little more uncomfortable. I want to say the longer you sit kind of in this relationship, and the way they're acting with one another, and instead of going from this aspect of like, oh, it's like this girl who obviously has a crush on him, and she says stuff that then gets them they have to book it out of a hotel, where she tells the like the concierge that they're lovers or things like that. And you could see, well, a 13-year-old girl, or um who has had this upbringing that she has, and dealt with all this, and has called a troubled child, she could do things like that or whatever, and that makes kind of sense in that way, or say certain things like that. But yeah, trying not to back myself into a corner. I can. That's why I think nowadays, after watching the international cut, it's one of the few times where I'll just kind of stick to the theatrical version, and um kind of, yeah, I think it's one of those where it's definitely hard to escape that element of it, or just disregard it. Definitely. And that was even before all the allegation stuff came out. It already watching it felt very weird. But then when you learn more about him, and you learn other aspects of like him having an affair during Fifth Element, and his ex-wife was even an actress in Fifth Element, but it was just all these kind of publicly known secrets of things that he's done. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic during that whole movie of like them going back and forth. But
because
yeah,
it does feel like they don't quite know what to do with it, because they
yes,
definitely, the way it is written, and like you say, I don't think anything is like necessarily John Reno's fault, because I believe him when he says that he played the character in this certain way, because I do feel that the character comes across as quite sexless. So a lot of this comes from the script, and the and the framing of Natalie Portman's the visual framing of Natalie Portman's character.
yes.
So, and it goes back, the script seems to go back and forth of like how much it wants to play this card, because we get certain scenes, we get two scenes where like that are played for like gags where like Natalie Portman's Matilda says like it says something like like I think I'm falling in love with you, and he like spits out his milk, and like so it is definitely played for laughs, and then you're like, oh no, I can write that off as like this girl like has it's like a trauma bonding thing, and she's going across, but like he realizes this she's just a little girl, and it's just got a crush, and he's not pandering to it. But then there's other moments like just after that scene, he like comes out the house, and he stops for a second, and then he has a flashback to like Matilda like lying in bed in a kind of which is kind of signified as him fantasizing about her, and so it goes back and forth about how much the feelings are reciprocal, and how much. So it even in the script, it feels confused in the script of like how much they're leaning into this being a relationship, or how much they're leaning into like being like, no, he just views her as like a daughter, and this is just the crush of an innocent crush of a teenage girl.
And I think that's when you talked about the confusion, that's one of the aspects where if it's like if they acknowledged it and like went, okay, in the same way that we're trying to right now, here's the elephant in the room, and here we're just going to go into this. I mean, obviously they would have made a movie that would not have been as get as much spread acclaim, because that makes for a much darker movie. That we might be able to go, okay, like the director, the writer, the storytellers are obviously making a statement about this, and they're making commentary or whatever it may be. Or if they went complete joke way on the opposite side of the spectrum, but because there's that confusion, that middle ground almost makes it worse at points, where it's in a way, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I think so. And I think like a lot of I think a lot of a lot of the blame has to go to Luc Besson. He wrote the script, he directed the movie. And even in the theatrical cut, where you can write it off more, you can definitely write it off more, and you can definitely see it as like just one-way traffic, and Leon actually being more of a father figure. And I know there's certain scenes in the international cut, particularly the infamous dress scene that was cut out of the that was the big sticking issue of the test audience that in the States. You like I say, with like Reno's acting, you can definitely read it like that, and you can definitely read it more like that in the theatrical cut. But there is even moments in the theatrical cut, like when they're playing the dress up game, where they're guessing the celebrities. The way Luc Besson films Natalie Portman, like doing Marilyn Monroe, and the certain close-ups and stuff like that, feel very sexualized and feel uncomfortably leering, like to the point where you're like, I'm not sure that I want to be looking at the screen right now.
Yes. No, watching it for this podcast, it definitely made me. I remember the dress up scene, but I forgot that particular. Like I remember him trying to be John Wayne, or even her Charlie Chaplin aspect. But when the Marilyn Monroe part, I'm pretty sure that's one of those moments where I had to look to my phone, or I was like, okay, and kind of back away with it. Like, not pay attention for a bit, because and again, because I think there's like Besson, denying of it so much that, but then as you were saying, the way he frames certain things, the way it's just handled.
Because I think I think obviously like there's different aspects of this where like when Luc Besson kind of kind of denies that aspect of it. You might give him the benefit of you might give him more of the benefit of the doubt if he didn't like so kind of leeringly photograph Matilda
Yes.
In the movie. And so that kind of reduces the benefit of doubt. And then, like, given the problematic aspects in his private life, it kind of reduces the benefit of the doubt even more to like,
Yes.
so it kind of, yeah, you just kind of don't give him the benefit of the doubt just based on it. Even if you didn't know about the problematic aspects of his private life, even if you didn't know that he married a 16-year-old when he was 33, and he, allegedly, allegedly assaulted, or there was some sort of sexual harassment, misconduct, with some women. Again, it's alleged because he's never been convicted of anything, so I will say alleged. So even if you didn't know all that, just watching the film itself, parking that to one side, just watching the film itself, there is definitely scenes within the movie where Matilda is framed in a highly sexualized way that feels uncomfortable and damages any benefit of the doubt you might give Luc Besson, and kind of writing it off just for laughs and
And I think it would have worked, like, if you had those uncomfortable moments where you have like more reaction shots from Reno or something where it's like, okay, we as the audience are supposed to know that he is also uncomfortable with, or something like that, even more so, where it's like, oh, this is a very uncomfortable moment and he's uncomfortable with it. So it lets us know that, yes, this is uncomfortable, rather than,
yes,
is this just the gaze of the director, in the same way that they talk about Tarantino filming Fee or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. And like I mean, I think if they had just lent into, because they do it twice. They do the kind of two milk spit takes, where you see the visible uncomfortableness of Leon. And if they just had kept that throughout and didn't have these other kind of weird moments, like the kind of fantasizing moment, and like these other kind of moments, which does suggest there is a kind of sexual feeling in return. And also the kind of framing issue of the way that the kind of gaze of the camera on Matilda. If they just, like, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because you would say, like, oh yes, on the surface it's problematic, but they go out their way to make it make it clear that Leon is uncomfortable with this and is not a part of this, that this is one-way traffic, that's what it is. And you can write it off and move on and just enjoy the rest of the film. But yeah, like, as much as I think this is one of the great action films of 1994 and one of the great action movies of the 90s, and I still highly rate it, there is this ugly thing right in the center of it, right in the heart of it, that really does taint it and stops it, maybe brings it down a notch.
Yeah, and the difficulty too is, as we've talked about, you have these two kind of incredible action sequences in the beginning, and then it's just that for like an hour 20 or something. I don't even know, but you're just kind of living in that until you hit basically the end with another kind of incredible action sequence.
Yes, because towards the end you get like these two incredible action sequences as well. Like, because like basically you get those two at the beginning, like the opening mission and the family massacre, but then at the end you get the rescue from the police station, and then obviously the final standoff at the apartment.
Yeah.
But most of the rest of the film is just us living in this world between the two characters, and occasionally visiting Tony and occasionally getting glimpses of Stan. But like there's this big huge section of the film that's like you say, probably almost an hour of the film, like longer in the international version, but yeah, but probably even in the theatrical cut makes up about, I don't know, 50 minutes of the film or whatever. So yeah, like it's kind of all you're seeing. So it's all so you have to you have to deal with it, like because like it's such a major part of the film. It takes up more of the film than anything else. So like that relationship. So.
But so what I okay, but what I will say, while as we I guess try and move this along away from the topic, well, I'll give it credit for of how much time you spend with these characters is that when it does hit the end, like it does, or the stuff like which we'll talk about in just a bit. I think one of the most intense scenes is between Matilda and Stan in like the bathroom sequence. But when they are in trouble or their lives are in peril or whatever, you really feel for them, I think, more than just if it was just a random kind of action movie where, it's kind of just a body count. And yeah, I think it does do that. Is the method to get to that point probably the best? Not at all. But I think it does, yeah, at least by the end you feel for the characters, both of them.
I would agree with that, yeah. And I think it is very impactful, and I think that like particularly if you particularly if you are viewing it through the gaze of like viewing this as like more of a less of a pedophilic relationship and more of a kind of paternal relationship. And if you kind of remove the kind of sexualized elements from your mind, I think there is something like very heartwarming about when Leon comes in and like massacres like the police station,
Yeah.
and then that kind of shot of them embracing, and then the shot of her like her feet dangling, which I feel is like kind of one of the iconic shots of the movie. And yes, that could be very creepy, viewing it through the lens of that we've just discussed. But if you view it through the lens that I think that like certainly John Reno was playing it,
Yes.
I think it comes off as quite heartwarming.
Well, and I agree. Even in the same bit, I mean, it can play off incredibly creepy, and it does in its own way. But there's the sequence, jumping way ahead, where he's trying to get her to escape out of through the vent shaft or whatever, and she's not wanting to leave him, and it's this intense thing, and he's telling her, sorry for jumping ahead, but since it's related, he's telling her that that he loves her and that they're going to be together. And you think about it, when I'm saying it in in the context we've been talking about it, and it sounds very gross, and watching it in a certain light it sounds really gross, but in that scene between like the two of them, it is just this very intense thing of like he's just telling her, like he's telling her this stuff that he loves her, all these things, but it's also like he's also telling her because he wants to save her, and he's just saying what needs to be said so that she can be safe, because he knows she won't leave without him. Which in the theatrical cut it plays more like that. In the international cut, again, you're like, I feel like there's more the I love you, we're gonna be together feels again a little different. There's a different emotion behind that, unfortunately. But the theatrical one, at least, it really hits.
Yes, you can still there is still enough space within the scene to read it in a kind of more heartwarming kind of surrogate father type way.
Yeah, like he knows he's going, spoiler if you haven't seen it yet, but he knows he's going to die, but he's just trying to like bear her the whatever it to keep her alive.
Yeah. And I think that like it's because we're kind of handing it into these kind of end action sequences because so we get basically two other major action sequences that are kind of like as we discussed they're kind of the bedrock of the action. You kind of get
Yes.
4 major action set pieces: the opening mission, the family massacre, then this one man attack on the police station, and then the final standoff with the SWAT team.
Yep.
So like so we'll deal with this kind of penultimate one first.
Yeah.
And it starts again. We get more great Oldman, who is Matilda manages to very easily get past the security and smuggling in a bag full of guns. The security for this police station is lax to say the least.
Because it's she says that it's like they ordered takeout or something.
Yeah. And they're
But,
just
yeah.
like, sure, yeah, that's what we normally do. That's fine. Just move on along. And we'll not check your bags for anything. We just believe that you've brought us Italian food. It's all good.
Yeah.
And then she follows Stan into the bathroom, and Stan, for some reason, is aware that, despite the fact of never meeting Matilda, is aware that he's been stalked into the bathroom. So then we get this wonderful shot of Matilda goes into the bathroom. The bathroom is empty, and then the door suddenly closes, and lo and behold, Stan was hiding behind the door, looking like a complete fucking creep. And
I mean, yeah, it goes into it more because it's like he doesn't even. It's almost like the what Street Fighter thing where he doesn't even reckon because of how much carnage he's probably done who she is or any of that, like the impact they had of, she says you killed my family or whatever. He's like, oh, basically like I'm such a bad guy or whatever. Like, what did I do to you? Or, because he probably gets a lot of it almost seems like he gets this regularly of people trying to get after him or something.
Yeah, that's true because like he at first he thinks that she's like being ordered to kill him by somebody because he's like, who do you work for? And then when she explains, when she starts explaining, he still doesn't know, but he's like, oh, so it's like a personal thing rather than so there is this kind of weird suggestion that this is like a kind of like weekly event for Gary Oldman's character, where either somebody with a personal vendetta has come to get him, or like an assassin, like a hitman from some gang has come to get him, and like this is just another day in Stanfield's life.
Yeah. That's probably why they let her in so easily. They're just like, oh, we deal with this all the time. No use fighting it.
Yes. Is it 4 o'clock already? That's usually when somebody tries to assassinate our good friend Norman Stansfield. Yes. So it is quite funny when you think about it like that. But it's a very effective scene, and also we get some more creepy pill crunching. I think that's got to be improvised as well, because like I don't know, it's just such a weird tick,
I've never seen anybody in real life or in a movie eat or take pills like that. Like it's such, I don't know how he decided to do that, but yeah, it feels like it needed to be improvised. I don't think that's a director's choice. I think.
No, I don't think so. Like the weird semi dance he does when he crunches through those pills. I don't know. I think that's definitely got to be an Oldman choice. But yeah, I think like as we discussed, basically the. Oh yeah. Also, I did want to mention, we get some we get like a flashback to show that like Malky, the one reasonable person in the unit, has been killed. He had a meeting with some Chinese gangsters, where he was killed, and obviously Leon killed him, even though that's not explicitly stated because they don't really know who Leon is. So we just kind of see Leon in the shadows killing these Chinese gangsters and Malky, and like it is interesting, like when you think about the movie for a minute of like, why are these men still following this clear nut job who's clearly going to get them all killed one day? Like,
Yeah.
I like, and you can kind of see it, like the guy, I don't know the character name, but the actor's name is Willie Oneblood. He's like an occasional actor, but reggae singer. And you can kind of see the kind of terror in his eyes of like, oh, what are you doing, Stan? Like,
Yeah.
what's happening? Why are we doing all this? I need answers. But then he just goes along with it anyway, and like, it just seems like Stan's pure conviction of will just steamrollers all these people, even though they clearly believe he's mad and obviously kind of know in the back of their minds that they should get out of this situation, but they're trapped in it and they just can't.
Yes. No, because so in that scene too, he's about to kill Matilda.
That's right.
And the only reason why she basically survives is because the guy comes in and is like, we just heard that this happened to one of our men, is basically the gist of it, which you've already explained. And then that's why he says, take her up to the office. But no, I agree. I think, it's one of those where you don't question it probably until after, when we're doing a talk on it like this. But thinking about it, you're like, oh, well, maybe like they're already in so deep about being corrupt officers or something that like, well, we just have to go along with it because he has dirt on us or something. I don't know.
I guess so. I mean, I guess like once you've committed a few crimes, and then once you've like, once you sold a bunch of drugs and also like killed a few people and know that like basically you know that your life choices either are you turn yourself in and spend the rest of your life behind bars, or you get murdered following this lunatic.
Yes. And so the lead up, I guess I'll jump back a little bit, because we talked about there's this, between Leon and Matilda, and then occasionally Tony, and throughout it, Leon keeps going to Tony and basically saying, kind of hinting about Matilda. Then he hints about her more, of saying he wants asking Tony about his money, which you can tell Tony is not that great of a mentor. Like, he's obviously been cheating Leon. It feels like, he asked Leon or Tony to the money that he's been holding for him to give it to Matilda, or where is his money if he ever needed it, and things like that. And you feel like, oh, Tony's kind of been skimping on him or something. At least this time watching it, I really felt that.
There is definitely a suggestion of that. It's never explicitly stated,
Yeah.
but definitely a suggestion of that.
But then it goes into so after, which I know you'll get into, the massacre, then it shows how, I guess, good of a detective Stan might be, because the only information is that he just what seemed foreign or something like that, and they're like, oh, we'll just go to the Italians because even though Jean Reno is French and whatever.
Oh,
but
yes, I did want to mention this.
Yeah.
I did want to mention this
Yes.
because I do think it's
No.
very funny.
I'll
Now,
let you take over.
So, like, the character is explicitly said the character is Italian, and it seems like that he, from the conversations with Tony, because he says like, when you first came here, you were wet behind the ears, and like, you had this trouble with women and whatever, and I picked you up, and kind of, I was a mentor to you and kind of stuff. So there's a suggestion there that like Leon came from Italy to America.
Okay.
Well, that in my
Yeah.
head, but then maybe not. Maybe
Oh.
maybe it just means like he was from out of New York and he came to New York and like he was wet behind the ears and he's still Italian American. I don't know, but
Yeah.
he's either actual Italian or he's Italian American, the character. So
Okay.
let's just say the character. It's because he's referred to as being Italian by a couple of characters. So I assume that that the character is supposed to be an Italian character, despite John Reno having the most French accent you could possibly imagine.
Okay. See, after all of my years and times of watching that, I have never caught that aspect. I've always been like, oh, apparently this like French guy somehow.
No, I think the character is supposed to be Italian American or Italian. I definitely think he's supposed, because like when Tony's talking to him, he talks to him as if he's one of theirs kind of thing. So I don't, because I remember that the way I remembered it is I just thought that he's a French character.
Yeah.
But but no, the way it's suggested, the way it's framed in the film, watching it and then watching it twice this month, it's definitely framed in the film as if he's either Italian or Italian American.
Okay.
Which is hilarious. And also, the other hilarious thing is, despite the fact that John Reno has the most French accent that you could imagine, and you imagine that John Reno is as French as you can get, he was actually born to Spanish parents in Morocco and didn't move to France until he was 17.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay. Yeah.
So there you go.
Yes.
John Reno, who you imagine to be the most French person in, one of the most French people out there, actually born to Spanish parents, and grew up for most of his childhood Morocco, which obviously is a former French colony. But and I think he grew up speaking Spanish and French. And obviously now that he is nearly 76 years old, he obviously spent most of his life in France. But yes, but I do think it's very funny. I think it's as funny as like all the times where Sean Connery is supposed to be something else. But it's but it's like, yes, I am a Lithuanian submarine captain, and you're like, are you, Sean? That is fair enough. I'm going to say I'm not fully buying it, but it's all right. It's all right. Hunt for the Red October is still a fun film. But yeah, moving on from accent nonsense. I think this action sequence is good, but then I think it's good that I feel that the movie leaves the best to last. And I feel that the best action sequence is this final SWAT team kind of attack on the apartments. And I have to say, one of the things that like is forever kind of embedded in my mind is when they come through the smoke, and then John Reno is obviously like kind of falls down and he's hanging from his feet at the door frame, and he fires off the two guns at once. Like that is an image that has always stuck with me, and it is always one of the images that I most associate with this film, like since I first saw it as a kid.
Yeah, no, it's a very cool scene because basically Stan's whole unit is killed. He runs back to the apartments, or Leon and Mathilda, and then Stan investigates with Tony, and Tony basically, again, Tony, who's supposed to be this great mentor and all this stuff, gives him up. And that's how they end up tailing Mathilda. And then the police, I think the SWAT, they take her hostage, and they say, is there a code to get into the door? And she says yes, even though there isn't. And they did the code. And so it warned.
Oh no, there is a code. There is a code, but she gives her
the wrong code.
The wrong code. It's like the code is like 212, and she gives like 322 or something. So I can't remember exactly what the code is, but like there is a code, but she gives the wrong code, and that's how he knows that it's not her.
Yeah. There. And then and then you just get this big action sequence. You get the same thing where there's a cop, and I love the bit even this time watching it where the other SWAT team are all hiding behind the wall. One peeks around the corner and they're like, "Can you see him?" Like, yeah. And then you see it, and it's Leon has the gun right to the guy's head, and he takes him hostage, and then they end up basically shooting their own guy trying to get him. But yeah, that whole sequence is great overall. I mean, you have all the blasting. Yeah,
I think like because that's a very that's a very kind of iconic moment as well. I think where they like basically Leon shoots out like a kind of water sprinkler or whatever. And then but then the SWAT team thinks that the shot is like their guy being shot. So they think that he's killed their guy, and then they like Leon hides in the flat and they just like machine gun their guy to death because like they can't see through all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that, and also in a Gary Oldman performance full of over the top moments, I think like this goes down as one of the great moments in overacting history, where he goes where the first SWAT team fails, and then he like grabs a guy and he says, "Get me everybody," and the guy goes, "What do you mean everybody?" And he just goes, "Everybody!"
Yeah. No, it's great.
It's so amazing. It's like he says it with so much force. You think his head is going to explode.
Yeah, I mean, there's just that vein about ready to pop out.
And the great thing about that is, and again, so we've worked out that Stansfield's kind of authority just comes from sheer force of will, because the guy doesn't ask any further questions. He's just like, "Oh, fuck it, I'm just gonna phone up the whole NYPD."
Yeah, just for this one guy.
So that's how Stanfield just gets things done. He just like people that like he just says things with enough force that people just don't question it. Like, fuck it, I don't want to talk to this guy anymore. He's clearly a lunatic. I'll just go along with them. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, like I like me just trying to do like a tenth of what Gary Oldman does. I feel exhausted now, but like so I mean, yeah, it's impressive. It's impressive. It is. There is many moments in this film that will go down as great moments in overacting history, but I think that's one of my favorites. That and the I love Mozart.
Yeah.
And then also like I do love when they like they blow up the room and you get that like close up shot of like Leon yelling. I think that's such a cool shot. I don't know why it like I'm so enamored by it, but like I just think it's what did you think of that?
No, I don't know why that part sticks with me for some reason, because as I talked about before, he basically he dispatches the first group. He's hatcheting the vent area, and this is where he says his goodbye to Mathilda, where he is talking about confessing his love for her. Either that of, whatever way you take it, we've already gone through that whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's only really small enough for her, and he's saying, that he'll be there with her, he'll see her again. She drops down, and then, he just like does the turnaround and he yells as they fire like a rocket. Apparently, because the NYPD, maybe they do, I don't know. They have a rocket that they fire into the apartment, and then he dives, and no, it is this very intense moment, and
it's like
it works weirdly enough. Yeah,
it's almost like a kind of superhero moment. It's almost like he's going like he's like he's hulking out, or he's going like berserker mode. Like
there's an element to it watching it where you could take it as being like, I guess, talking out of context of it being this ridiculous overacting part, but maybe with everything that happens, like it just, I don't know, it works. I don't know.
I think maybe because like Besson's kind of style is like so kind of hyper stylized and so kind of comic booky anyway, that the kind of the over the topness still work. It doesn't feel out of place. It still feels fitting of a piece with the rest of the kind of universe that's been kind of created, the world that's kind of been created within the film.
Yeah, no, I agree. And um but yeah, it leads to this moment where you think, oh, he's probably dead, and then they happen to find a survivor among the carnage, and yeah, it happens to be he was able to get into one of the police uniform, or the SWAT team members' uniforms, and put on their um like their
Yes,
mask and
which
everything.
is one of
Yeah,
those, very movie things where you're like, and also as well as being a hitman, he's like a part-time illusionist, because like that's the sort of
yeah,
quick change that you only get from like a magic show.
yeah,
But again, you can't think too much about these things because
yeah,
as we've discussed, our other podcast ventures that we've done is to do with horror, and the amount of times where somebody is murdered in a room and then like the slasher killer then manages to disappear that body within about 30 seconds of the next
yes,
person entering the room. Like you can't dwell on these things too much, neither
yes,
in action movies nor in horror movies. Otherwise you'd be here all day.
yes.
Um,
But what's interesting with this beat, and it's not played for laughs at all, this whole end sequence, but you can see the surprise on his face almost at these moments where they even take off the mask and they're like analyzing him, and he's talking to them like he's giving a couple word answers, and none of them, even though his thick accent, all this, they know who they're hunting. They like don't think anything of it. And
Yes, because
but yeah, yeah,
again, we're kind of showing that, like, despite the fact that Stansfield is a clear lunatic and sociopath, like he also appears to be like the only competent detective in New York.
yes,
Where the rest of them are like, la di da,
yeah,
I don't know. This seems this guy's injured. He's probably one of ours. No, 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 no. Like, yeah, everybody else is like incompetent. He's the only one sharp enough to spot that, like, oh, that's the guy we're hunting. That's Leon.
yeah,
Okay, should probably take him out.
yeah. And it goes to this really neat like POV scene where they just let Leon go. He puts his mask on. He, like, as you see SWAT team filing up to go, basically do a widespread sweep, he's walking past them, about to walk into the sunlight, basically free, and then you kind of see the slight bang. It's basically all in silence, and then you see the camera as his POV fall, which Stan, yeah, obviously shot Leon in the back, and then you get this whole beat where, um, yeah, it's like the action star send off where he's like, I have a present from Mathilda, and then he gives Stan opens up his hand, and then it's all like the pins from the grenades that are filled with on Leon's vest. And you get the reaction shot of Stan of like that he's screwed.
Yes, and again, I think it's one of the all time great "oh fuck, I'm about to die" faces
Yes.
in action cinema, which is one of my favorite action movie cliches of, like, the villain realizes he's about to die in like 2 seconds, and then kind of resigns himself to it, or is angry about it or whatever, like, and I think this is This is a Hall of Fame entry in that particular subgenre of action movie beats.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, and then
I don't know. It's just a great little end. It's a great way to end the movie. I don't know, and that's how it almost, when you watch that part, it almost feels like, okay, that's the end. But then you go on. You have this scene where Matilda meets with Tony, where Tony finally seems like he's upset about Leon, that Leon's dead, but it's almost more like, again, looking at it from how I do now. Like, are you just upset because you have to give up all that money to Matilda or something? Because she said she wants to be a hitman, and he yells at her, and then that she has to go to school, and that she'll get her money, I think, when she has to.
I'm going to give old Tony the benefit of the doubt. Like,
Yeah.
I think he does have to. I think even though he's probably skimming from Leon and probably not giving him his full due, I think that he does hold some affection for him, or certainly that is the way that Danny Aiello kind of plays the character. So I'm going to give him some benefit of the doubt here, that despite the fact he is a crook and he's probably fucking Leon over a bit, I think he does hold some affection for him.
Yes. Yeah, we get it. And then Matilda goes, I want to say it's just back to the same school that she went to.
Yes, it is.
No, she was supposed to go to in the beginning.
Yeah, it's the same school that like phoned up earlier on in the movie. Or certainly that's the suggestion, that it is the same school that she's going back to, because the way the principal kind of talks to her suggests that, like, they had met before, and like they'd had previous history, so it's definitely suggested that it's the same school. But it's an interesting point you make, that like it's interesting that like little bits like this do make it stand out from kind of your normal 90s action movies, because like most standard 90s action movies would have ended on Leon sacrificing himself, and then we get like a panning out shot, kind of looking on like the devastation of the kind of the building, being all shot up, and like on the police cars, and then we just kind of cut the credits, because like quite often in a lot of 90s action movies, we get like a shot like that pans out onto kind of the devastation of what's happened, and various kind of police cars kind of zooming into the scene, or we get one of those classic somebody being loaded up into the back of an ambulance endings, which I don't know, man. Like doing the podcast and like looking, revisiting a lot of these 90s action movies, that happens. That ending happens a lot, like more than I remember as a kid. Like, I guess you don't pay attention to these things as a kid, but revisiting a lot of these, I'm like, how many do these end with just somebody being loaded up in the back of the ambulance and making one final quippy comment before we kind of pan upwards to the kind of the kind of the eagle-eyed view of this scene? Turns out quite a lot of them.
Yes. Yeah, quite a lot. Yes.
And yeah, I guess that's it. I guess that's Leon. Do you have any final thoughts on Leon? Anything we didn't cover? Anything that just anything else that you want to say about it that maybe you didn't manage to say in the main body of the conversation?
No, I mean, I think it's hard to do the move based on this conversation, based on the discussion that we had to have, obviously the elephant in the room. It's hard to do the movie justice fully of like, but also not, because it is a very, like, putting certain aspects aside, it is a very good movie. It still holds up really well as an action movie. And it sets itself apart from being just like your run-of-the-mill generic action flick that, we've either discussed on this podcast many times, or I'm sure anybody listening has seen countless times. Even by today's standards, it still feels very unique, despite kind of having a very simplistic plot in a way. Um, but yeah, I don't know if it's because I'm older now or a parent or because of changing society. It was one of those where I was watching it, and like here's this thing that I probably watched, a ton of times when I was in, I don't know, middle school, high school, and so on. And then I'm like, oh wow, like it definitely hit in a different way that I was very much desensitized to, or didn't notice when I was younger. Yeah, it's just fascinating to watch and revisit, opposed to other movies where we've covered where they've either been like, oh, this is better than I remember, or it doesn't hold up in a way just because of quality. Yeah, this is the only one where the holding up isn't based on the quality itself. It's based on like these external factors of the people involved in making it.
Yeah, the kind of obviously like we discussed I think quite extensively the kind
Yes,
of
yes.
elephant in the room and all the problems with Luc Besson, the person. But I do think that maybe something that I did want to mention before we finish as we wrap up this conversation on Leon is I do think you're right. I do think it stands out. I do think it's unique. I do think like while the movie in itself is nothing like a spaghetti western. I do think that there is that kind of merging of an American sensibility with a European sensibility, I think does create like a fun uniqueness. I think like that particular flavor of like merging a particular type of American sensibility, a particular type of European sensibility often leads to quite a fun, quite a fun final product, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if it was, I mean, I know it was written by Besson too, but I feel like if it was done by just a strictly American director, especially during the 90s with the type of movies that were coming out during that point, I feel like it would have went a grittier, it would have been, it just would have, yeah, as you said, had that fun element that the movie still holds up with to this day. I think it would be just grittier and darker, and it just, I don't know, would be a little bit more of a sludge to get through.
Yeah, I do think like it wouldn't have like that kind of it wouldn't have that same sensibility. It wouldn't have like maybe it wouldn't have that kind of more fun aspect. I think maybe it would be more I don't know, possibly more on a kind of man on fire type
Yeah.
like kind of thing. Which I know some people love Man on Fire, but like not necessarily my favorite thing. But that's a separate conversation. But like I do think it played more straight
Yeah, exactly.
in a kind of Man on Fire type vein. I think you're right. If it was strictly American, but like when I say like a merging of an American sensibility and a European sensibility, I guess I mean much like like the Sergio Leone stuff. It's
Yeah.
not there's no actual Americans involved. It's just like uh, it's like that kaleidoscope thing. It's like an American, like a European kind of projecting what they think an American sensibility is. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And
It's like,
then
oh,
like it refracting in a strange way.
yeah. It's like all the characters go out to, with the exception of a couple are all like caricatures of what an American, American dirty cop would be like, or what whatever,
Yeah.
um, a child from an abused home would be like, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. Although I guess like in similarity with like American films made by Americans, it like Danny Aiello just played like, well, I don't know. I've not seen all of his films, but from the films I've seen, he does largely play Italian American stereotype.
He does, yeah. Because I
and
had to
he's
look.
very good at it. And I'm not knocking him. He's
Yeah.
very good at it. He's a funny guy. I like him. But like, that's tends to be the characters he seems to play.
Yes. Well, when I was looking up the character's name, because I was going to, like, when in the beginning we couldn't remember. I was like, I want to say it's Sal, but then I was like, no, Sal is Do the Right Thing, which he's also at a Italian restaurant there. Oh, it's Tony. Okay, another go-to like Italian American name. Okay, like that seems to be like he has all the go-to names that.
That is true. That is true. I would say that Tony is probably the number one go-to.
Yes,
name.
it
is. That is like Italian American stereotype 101 of like, what are we going to call the character? Want to call him Tony? Sure. Yeah.
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 But yeah, I think much like you already said with spaghetti westerns, it holds up well in terms of making something, despite its dark content, and make something still very entertaining. There's still like a very high entertainment factor.
Yeah,
so,
and I think I think that really rests on like I mean like I think Danny Aiello does a good job as Tony, and I think that like it really as a supporting character, and some of those supporting characters are good, but I think that a lot of this film works on the back of it's 4 big action sequences, and
yes.
B, the central 3 performances of Reno, Portman, and Oldman. If you didn't have those performances, this would be nowhere near as an iconic kind of cult classic movie as it is. It is really those performances, those 3 performances, that really elevate this film, and is why it's still talked about so much 30 years later.
And I feel like it's one of those two where you need all 3, where it's like if you switched out one of those actors with somebody else, it wouldn't have worked. It's like just for some reason the triangle, I guess, or whatever, the 3 of them created this like kind of perfect recipe for the movie, Yeah. They just all work off of each other really well.
I absolutely. So if people have not seen Léon, I definitely say check it out. It's got great action. Those 3 performances from John Reno, Natalie Portman, and Gary Oldman are all top tier performances in action movie cinema and in 90s cinema generally. And yeah, that kind of wraps up our conversation on Léon. So, Craig, do you want to this episode? The listeners will be listening to it when it comes out in, I believe, October. Is there anything you want to plug or anything coming up in the pipeline for either yourself or Bloodhound Picks or just anything you want to plug at all?
So yeah, I have not been at the last couple because I was doing the show that I had talked about previously on many episodes of highlighting. That show is now in editing process. It'll be done by that point, and getting some additional material for extra like documentary elements that will be added to the kind of comedy special portion. But so around October, when this will be listening to, also with Bloodhound Picks, we should by this point be having some new episodes coming out more regularly, and we are switching it up to where we're going to focus on looking at specifically like the VHS artwork, and how back for those of you that are of my generation or older, you would go into a video store and you would see the movies kind of artwork, and you'd read a brief synopsis, and you would not know, and that's all you would know about the movie unless you knew somebody that saw it. And so you'd kind of come up with your own interpretation of what that movie could be. And we're going to really focus on that aspect um, of finding these movies that maybe we'd never seen and what we believe the movie could be about before we actually watch it, and probably have our expectations broken each time. Or failing.
So
But
I mean, like I think that sounds like a great concept. And the thing I was going to say about that, I was going to say that many horror fans of our generation and older
Yes.
were tricked by amazing cover art and a snappy synopsis, and were let down quite badly.
Yes, horror fans, or even looking at probably some fantasy and sci-fi too, which had amazing covers and the same exact thing. But yeah, that's Bloodhound.
That is true. That is
Yes.
true. All those fantasy films with those like Frank Fratida inspired covers. Oh
Yes.
fuck.
Yeah. Yep. But you can find that on Bloodhound Pix. PIX is the thing. And yeah, I'm happy to be back on this show more regularly now that I don't have to do the one-person show anymore.
Excellent. So, yeah. Well, it's great to have you back, Craig. And yes, listeners, I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of All 90s Action all the time. As I'll give the usual spiel, you can find us on all your normal podcast providers, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify podcast, or Spotify for podcasters, whatever that's called. Just Spotify, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, all the other ones as well. I think we're on like Castbox and iHeartRadio or whatever. Like we're on a bunch of them.
Mhm.
And then if you want to really support the show, you want to up that algorithm for us, you can rate, review, and subscribe 5 stars, please. If you want to check out any of my other stuff, New Horror Express still exists, even though it is now ended as a going venture. There is still like 185 episodes out there in podcast land, so you can still check all of them out anytime you wish. You don't need to rate and review and subscribe to that podcast because it's ended now, but you can still enjoy it. And the last thing for me to do is just to say, come back next month when we will be looking at an early Stephen Chow movie that we've not seen yet. We're very excited to watch.
Yes.
Called Love on Delivery. So we'll be very excited to dig into that for our November episode. But until then, see ya.